For the next 2 decades, the ceremonies went on. Little things were added here and there. People from around the world began to understand that we had something very special here. Cars were asked to only go downhill, and downhill because they could turn off their engines and the pollution wouldn't be so horrible. Sometimes the old cars would go down 4 across. They also asked the drivers to turn their headlights off, and that was so everybody could see the glow of the lights without having glare in their own eyes. Mr. Thomas Hoag, the planter of the trees, was asked to turn the lights on every year until 1940. By 1928, 240,000 people viewed the lights every year. The lane was world famous. By 1923, the lane was lit for 10 days, and the stars of Bethlehem were hung between the trees. 1928 was the year that the Star of Palau was first lit. By 1930, over 6,000 light bulbs were being used on the trees. They're still not all lit, but that was a lot of bulbs. In 1937, the first ever live radio broadcast of Down Christmas Tree Lane, which took about 15 minutes, described to people throughout the U.S. what it was like to be here with the lights on. In May of 1938, Altadena did something very special. They sent a baby deodore to Washington, D.C. They wanted to make it very special, and so they had a starlet from the movie Men with Wings to take the baby deodore in her cellophane jacket, as it was called, to Washington, D.C. to celebrate the 20th year of the first mail delivered by air. In 1940, there's communication between Charles D. Purley, the Altadena Chamber of Commerce Secretary, and movie star Mary Pickford regarding the location of Christmas Tree Lane. By the way, Mary Pickford was the first female Grand Marshal of the Rose Parade ever in 1933. From 1941 to 1945, the lane was dark. We had blackout conditions, and we wanted to honor those blackout conditions. Otherwise, we would have been a target at Christmas time. There were postcards that came out in the 40s. They featured the stars of Bethlehem. Those are the 6-pointed stars. In 1956, Christmas Tree Lane Association was established to take over all the duties of lighting the lane and funding it too. Community commitment sort of waned from that time until 1966. In 1966, Lenore Denny was asked to start a women's group, because until that time, Christmas Tree Lane Association was an all-male group. What she did was start the Women's Auxiliary. They were to do the fundraising. They put on dinners, and they even started the Candy Cane Carnival at Farnsworth Park that ran for 4 years. They made thousands of dollars, and that's really important because we needed things to be replaced at that time. Note cards were designed at that time for the correspondence that the Women's Auxiliary would have. They became so popular that they were fundraising items as well, showing the Christmas trees and the 1885 planting date. After 5 years, Christmas Tree Lane Association, the men, and the Women's Auxiliary joined, and we've been one group ever since. Outside help is still needed because this is a lot of work. So Local 11 of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers for 19 years helped us with lights up and lights down. They had the equipment and the know-how. The equipment was the basket that was elevated. We don't have that now. We have to do it all by ladders and pulleys. Another tradition started sometime in the late 60s, and that was the singing of jingle bells to bring Santa Claus on to give out the candy canes. Rosa Johnson, Mrs. Altadena, was inspired to do that every year, and I remember her doing that too, until she died. In 1967, all of the trees were lit for the first time, and they added blinking lights. In 1970 was the 50th anniversary of lighting the lane, and of course it was rained out, but have no fear, they did have a littler ceremony in the community room at the library. In 1973, we had the energy crisis, so we could not have energy going to anything just for beauty. The lane was dark that year. In 1978, high winds blew some of the branches down, and we couldn't decorate the whole lane, so we decorated only 2 blocks from Calaveras to Alameda, which is here. In 1982, Altadena Rotary sponsored the event, and they had the Elliott Band and Choir to perform. In 1986, Michael Antonovich became our supervisor, and he began to turn the lights on. In 1990, Christmas Tree Lane became a historical landmark, and this is the plaque that commemorates that. In September, Michael Antonovich unveiled the plaque for all to see. And the ceremony that year was in honor of what Tim Gregory spearheaded to make this a special place. This is the only one that's a living monument. Or at least it was the first one, I don't know, they may have changed that. The amount of people that came at that time for that ceremony was between 3,000 and 5,000 people. In 1995, we had the 75th Jubilee celebration, and that was also a big to-do. So we had about 5,000 at that time too. So from the 2000s now, all the wires had to be replaced. The electrical boxes. So much needed to be done. It was going to be very expensive. Fortunately, Michael Antonovich, our supervisor at the time, found $125,000 that was able to help us to do this. We still thank him for that. In 2001, the ceremony was dedicated for the lives lost in 9/11. In 2009, the Winter Arts and Crafts Festival was added to the evening of celebration. From 2012 to 2019, there was a severe drought. We had to add dry wells. Maybe you can see one we have blocked with stones. So there's about 4 of those per tree. And if we hadn't added those, we would have lost more than 20 trees that year. But fortunately, all the labor was volunteer. Everything we do here is volunteer. And they were able to dig holes and fill them with rocks, so they're called dry wells. And that way the water can get down quickly to the deeper roots. We did lose 3 trees that year. In 2017, that was the first year that all of the lights were LEDs, which saved the lane over $1,000 each year in lighting fees. In 2018 and 19, we had so many people coming to the event, over 7,000. In fact, up to 9,000 was suggested at one of the years. We had to move the bandstand from in front of the library into the intersection in order to accommodate all the people. 2020 is our centennial year, and of course COVID-19 is here, so we cannot celebrate in person. With your help, we can celebrate together for many years to come. Thanks for spending this time with us on Christmas Tree Lane to learn more about it. Enjoy your holidays. And from the Altadena Historical Society, the Altadena Library, and Christmas Tree Lane Association, we wish you happy holidays.